From spying on high-profile Americans to the lies surrounding the Vietnam War, all the way to the recruitment of some of the bad guys at the end of World War II. Here is part 2 of the top 10 declassified documents that reveal unspeakable things. Starting off in our number 10 spot, we have Operation Paperclip. This operation began in 1946 when the President of the United States at the time, Harry Truman, authorized it. Basically, the entire point of it was to lure scientists from Nazi Germany over to the United States after the Second World War. This was done in an effort to aid the country in their post-war efforts, as well as to ensure that the valuable knowledge these people had would not end up in the hands of perhaps the Soviet Union or either side of the divided East and West Germany. Had it not been classified information at the time, this would have been highly controversial, as many of these people were involved in, and sometimes even leaders of that hateful party. Former President Truman stood by his decision, saying that because of the relations with the Soviet Union, quote, "this had to be done and was done." Several of the scientists that were a part of this program were later investigated because of their former ties, but one was only ever tried out of the over 1,600. None of the Paperclip scientists were ever found guilty for any crimes either in the United States or in Germany. Perhaps the most famous of all of the Paperclip scientists was Wernher von Braun, who really played a huge role in advancing NASA's Apollo missions. In our number 9 spot today, we have the investigation. In 1967, while in the midst of the Six-Day War, which was between Israel and neighboring states, an Israeli aircraft attacked the USS Liberty, which was a ship that was gathering information for the US NSA. In this attack, 34 Americans were killed and 171 were injured. Many people, of course, were outraged and figured that this attack was intentional. Many people believed that the Israeli government meant to follow through with this attack so that they could prevent the, quote, spy ship from intercepting sensitive information about upcoming battles. In the end, declassified documents from both the US and Israeli government agencies showed a very different story. It turns out that the attack was in fact not deliberate, and that pilots had thought that the USS Liberty was an enemy ship, which was why the attack was launched. The declassified reports show the actual position they had when the incident went down. And our number 8 spot today, we have Project Horizon. Even before people were going to space, we had big goals in mind for the world of space travel. In 1959, there were plans for a proposed manned military base that would be located, of course, on the moon. This plan, which was dubbed Project Horizon, would, quote, develop and protect potential United States interest on the moon, as said in now declassified documents. It was estimated at the time to cost about $6 billion, and the projected operational date was December of 1966, which is when they thought they could have 12 soldiers on the base by. The project was not only wanted to study more about the surface of the moon, but what better of a place to spy on the Earth than the moon? This project, of course, never came to fruition, and the reason it stopped progressing was because the president at the time, Dwight Eisenhower, rejected it at the same time that the responsibility for America's space program was being transferred over to NASA. In our number 7 spot today, we have consideration. Presidential duties certainly are not easy, and making big important decisions is likely a very nerve-wracking experience that you would probably want as much information as possible for. That is exactly why, around the time of the Cuban Missile Crisis, Joint Chiefs of Staff Chairman Maxwell Taylor wrote a memo at the request of the then President John F. Kennedy. The memo was requested because Kennedy wanted to know what the human cost would be of invading Cuba. The declassified memo explained that should the Cuban forces use conventional weapons and not tactical nukes, that, quote, our medical plans are drawn up to accommodate up to 18,500 casualties in the first 10 days of the operation. He then goes on to explain that if these tactical nuclear weapons were in fact used, that, quote, there is no experience factor upon which to base an estimate of casualties. The number they could estimate is already more than terrible enough. I truly do not even want to hear the next one. In our number 6 spot today, we have Project Minaret. This is a document that became declassified in 2013 as a part of the National Security Archives efforts. This historical document describes a sort of watch list of prominent Americans who were critical of the Vietnam War. The document explains that their overseas communications were tapped and listened into by the government from 1967 to 1973, and a quote from the document reads, quote, President Johnson wanted to know if the domestic anti-war movement was receiving help from abroad. squad. The project expanded so much that it went on to include more than 1,600 people, including civil rights leaders like Martin Luther King Jr., Whitney Young, and Muhammad Ali. There were also other people like Democratic U.S. Senator Frank Church of Idaho, Republican Senator Howard Baker of Tennessee, New York Times columnist Tom Wicker, and Washington Post humor columnist Art Buchwald. The surveillance began under President Johnson, but it continued on through to the Nixon administration. In the end, the only reason it was stopped was because Attorney General Elliot Richardson was concerned about its very doubtful and murky legality and decided during the Watergate scandal that it would be best to shut it down. In our number 5 spot today, we have Operation Gladio. This is a plan that was developed during the Cold War by the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. Basically, the plan was designed to keep Europe as safe as possible if there were to be a Soviet invasion, and to do so, the plan was to form these kinds of secret armies in many NATO countries like Italy, Belgium, and France. These armies would be preparing for a potential takeover, and they would then lead the resistance if this were to occur. Some of the preparations for this plan, should it have to go forward, were things like spying as well as hoarding ammunition, which is a frightening thought. This project was so secret that not only was the Soviet Union obviously kept out of the loop, but some of the highest ranking officials in the countries involved didn't even know about these little secret armies. In our number 4 spot today, we have a double agent. Oleg Penkovsky was a Soviet military intelligence officer who had a high rank, but he was actually working for the United States and Great Britain during the Cold War. Sort of like a double agent sort of thing. He is best known for the role he played during the Cuban Missile Crisis of 1962, where he gave the US government some information that turned out to be extremely valuable that pertained to the capabilities of the Soviet missiles that had been installed in Cuba. In the end, Oleg was found out by the other Soviet intelligence officers, charged with treason, and executed in 1963, which is a terrible ending to that story. But what if I told you that some declassified documents just might have revealed a different side of this story? There are apparently some people who believe, because of these documents, that Oleg was just a decoy who may have actually relayed false information to the US about the Soviet arms capabilities. The intelligence he gave them just may be proof that his loyalty was with the Soviet Union the entire time. In our number 3 spot today, we have the aircraft. In 1988, a US warship in the Persian Gulf ended up shooting down an aircraft. Unfortunately, this turned out to be a civilian craft that was on its way to Dubai, and in the end, there were no survivors. According to declassified documents, Navy personnel incorrectly identified the plane as an Iranian fighter jet before launching the missile that took the flight down. In 1996, the United States reached a settlement with Iran where they paid $61.8 million to compensate the families of the victims, but it is said that there has never been an apology issued. In now declassified official investigation documents, it is said that they could not find any fault with the naval officers who brought down the flight. Others have suggested that this is untrue, as journalists pointed to discrepancies between the official report and the later accounts of what occurred. Like, allegedly it was originally said that the flight deviated from its standard route, but this is said to have been found to be false. The report also apparently says that the warship was operating in international waters at the time, when it was really operating in Iranian territorial waters. In our number 2 spot today, we have the lie. Thanks to a document from the National Security Agency that was declassified, many people received a confirmation of what they long believed. This is the idea that one of the 2 supposed North Vietnamese attacks on US ships in the Gulf of Tonkin in 1964, the attack that the president at the time, Lyndon Johnson, and his administration used to justify the massive escalation of the Vietnam War, yeah, apparently it didn't happen at all. The historical analysis conducted and declassified by the NSA revealed this all. In the article, it is noted that intelligence and defense officials who knew about the faked attack, or rather who doubted the evidence brought forward by the administration, didn't speak up because of a, quote, awareness that President Johnson would brook no uncertainty that could undermine his position. It's a terrifying reality, especially when we look at the war and what went on to happen from there. In our number 1 spot today, we have New Techniques. This is a project that was originally released in 2004, but it was heavily redacted by the Bush administration and then was released again with a little less deletions by the Obama administration, and basically it describes what is called, quote, enhanced interrogation techniques that were used on certain detainees that were part of a terror group. These techniques include things like something called walling, which includes pulling the prisoners forward and then pushing them back into the wall, stress positions, sleep deprivation, waterboarding, and sometimes even isolation and sensory deprivation for hours on end, sometimes with a, quote, harmless insect placed inside of the box with them, which is intended to increase the discomfort. All in all, there's still a lot in these documents that hasn't been fully revealed to the public, but I think we've all seen enough movies to understand. Alright guys, that has been our list for today. Thank you so much for checking it out. I've been your host today, Olivia Kozlowski, and I'll see you all next time. Bye!